The battlefield stretched across the crimson plains of Zirian Prime like a graveyard of broken dreams. Smoke rose from countless craters where plasma cannons had torn the earth apart, and the acrid smell of burned metal hung heavy in the air. Among the debris and scattered weapons, something moved with painful slowness. Kethera dragged herself forward on 3 legs, her fourth hanging useless and bloody at her side. The Vorthak combat hound's blue-black fur was matted with dirt and her own blood, but her golden eyes still burned with fierce intelligence. Each breath sent sharp pain through her ribs, and she could taste copper in her mouth, but she refused to give up. The retreat had happened so fast. One moment, her pack was advancing alongside the Galactic Alliance forces, their enhanced senses guiding soldiers through the maze of enemy positions. The next, everything fell apart when the hegemony's new sonic weapons activated. The high-frequency assault had sent every Vorthak in the battalion to their knees, clutching their sensitive ears in agony. That's when her own people abandoned her. Commander Zethus had looked down at her writhing form with cold calculation in his reptilian eyes. "The hounds are compromised," he had hissed to his lieutenant. "They're liability now. Leave them." "But, sir, they're still valuable assets," the younger officer protested. "We could carry the wounded ones back for treatment." "Too much weight. Too much risk." Zethus turned away dismissively. "We need to move fast or lose everything. The mission comes first." Kethera had watched through pain-blurred vision as her handler, Sergeant Vex, actually took a step toward her. For a moment, hope flared in her chest. Vex had trained with her for 3 years. They had saved each other's lives dozens of times. Surely he wouldn't leave her here to die. But when Zethus snapped, "That's an order," Sergeant Vex's shoulders sagged. He looked at Kethera one last time, his expression unreadable behind his helmet's faceplate, then turned and followed the retreating column. One by one, the other handlers did the same. Some didn't even look back. The sounds of the withdrawal faded into the distance, leaving only the groans of the wounded and the occasional crackle of cooling metal. Kethera's packmates lay scattered around her, some still breathing, others already claimed by death. The sonic attack had damaged their inner ears so severely that most couldn't even stand, let alone fight or flee. Hours passed. The pain in Kethera's side grew worse, and she knew that internal bleeding was slowly killing her. Her enhanced healing factor was struggling against the severity of her injuries, but without medical attention, it was a losing battle. That's when she heard the voices. At first, she thought it was delirium brought on by blood loss. The sounds were too strange, too alien compared to the guttural languages of the Alliance species she knew. These voices had a musical quality, rising and falling in patterns that somehow conveyed urgency and concern. "Jesus Christ, look at this mess," one voice said in a language Kethera's translator implant couldn't immediately parse. "What the hell happened here?" "Sonic weapons, by the look of it," another replied. "See how what are these things? Some kind of war dogs." "Vorthak combat hounds," a third voice corrected, and Kethera's ears perked up despite the pain. This one knew what she was. They're bred for warfare. Enhanced senses, pack tactics, incredible loyalty. The Alliance uses them for reconnaissance and assault operations. Well, someone sure as hell didn't show them any loyalty, the first voice said bitterly. "Look, this one's still breathing." Kethera forced her head up and saw 3 bipedal figures approaching. They were unlike any species she'd encountered before. Tall, but not as tall as Zethus's people, with pale skin and strange patches of fur only on their heads. Their equipment looked crude compared to Alliance technology, but they moved with the confident precision of experienced soldiers. The one in the lead knelt beside her, and she got her first close look at a human being. His face was weathered and scarred, with small blue eyes that studied her with surprising gentleness. When he reached out slowly, palm up, she caught his scent. Unlike the cold, reptilian smell of her former handlers, this creature radiated warmth and something else she couldn't identify. "Easy, girl," he said softly. "We're not going to hurt you." Kethra's translator finally kicked in, converting his words into concepts she could understand. The tone was soothing, respectful even. When was the last time anyone had spoken to her like that? Her handlers had always been efficient, but cold, treating her like a piece of equipment that happened to breathe. Staff Sergeant Chun, one of his companions, said, "We should move. This area isn't secure, and we've got our own mission parameters." Chun didn't take his eyes off Kethra. "What's our mission, Corporal Martinez?" "Reconnaissance and intelligence gathering on abandoned Alliance positions," Martinez replied, consulting a tablet. "No mention of rescue operations. And what does the manual say about wounded prisoners of war?" Martinez was quiet for a moment. "That they're to be treated with dignity and given medical aid according to the conventions of warfare." "Exactly." Chun slowly extended his hand toward Kethra. "And I don't see any reason why that shouldn't apply to our four-legged allies here." The third human, a young woman with short brown hair, looked uncertain. "Sarge, she's pretty badly hurt, and we don't know if she's dangerous. Those teeth look like they could take your arm off." "Lieutenant Hayes," Chin said patiently, "look at her eyes. Really look." Hayes moved closer and studied Kethra's face. After a moment, her expression softened. "Intelligence. She understands what we're saying." "More than that," Chin said. "She's deciding whether to trust us." It was true. Kethra was weighing her options with the calculating mind that had kept her alive through dozens of battles. These strange beings could be enemies trying to extract information from her. They could be scavengers looking to sell her to the highest bidder. Or they could be something entirely different. Chun continued, speaking in that same gentle tone. "I know you're hurt, and I know you have every reason not to trust anyone right now. Your own people left you here to die, didn't they?" The accuracy of his assessment sent a shiver through Kethra's body. "How did he know?" "We've seen it before," Chun continued, as if reading her thoughts. "Different species, same story. When things get tough, the strong abandon the wounded and save themselves. That's not how we do things." "Sergeant," Martinez warned, "we really should..." "Shut it, Martinez." Chin's voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to making life and death decisions. "We're not leaving anyone behind. Human, alien, or anything in between." He looked back at Kethra. "I'm going to try to help you, okay? But I need you to trust me. Can you do that?" For a long moment, Kethra studied the human's face. There was something in his expression that she'd never seen in any of her handlers. Genuine concern. Not for her tactical value or her utility as a weapon, but for her as a living being in pain. Slowly, carefully, she lowered her head to the ground and closed her eyes. It was the Vorthack gesture of submission and trust taught to every pup in the breeding facilities. But this was the first time she'd ever offer it freely. Chun smiled, though she couldn't see it. "That's a good girl. Hayes, break out the medical kit. Martinez, set up a perimeter. We're not moving until she's stable." "Sir, this could compromise our mission timeline," Martinez protested. Chun was already examining Kethra's wounds with surprisingly gentle hands. "Our mission is to gather intelligence." "Well, here's some intelligence for you. The Alliance is willing to abandon their most valuable assets when things get tough. That tells us a lot about their command structure and their priorities." He paused in his examination and looked up at his subordinates. "Besides, since when do we leave wounded soldiers behind?" "She's not exactly a soldier, sir," Hayes said, but her tone was uncertain. "Look at her gear," Chin pointed out. "That's military-grade armor, even if it's damaged. Look at her scars. Those are combat wounds from multiple engagements. Look at her conditioning. She's trained, disciplined, and she's been fighting this war longer than any of us." He returned his attention to Kethra's injuries. "In my book, that makes her a soldier. And soldiers don't abandon each other." As Chun worked, cleaning her wounds with supplies from his kit, Kethra found herself experiencing something unprecedented. The human's touch was careful and respectful, and he spoke to her throughout the process, explaining what he was doing and warning her when something might hurt. "This is going to sting a bit," he said before applying antiseptic to a deep gash. "But it'll help prevent infection." No one had ever warned her about pain before. Handlers and medics had simply done what they needed to do, treating her like a piece of equipment undergoing maintenance. The concept of asking for her consent or preparing her for discomfort was completely alien. But these aliens were doing exactly that. "There," Chun said finally, sitting back on his heels. "That should hold you for now. But you need proper medical attention, the kind we can't provide out here." He looked thoughtful for a moment, then made a decision that would change everything. "Hayes, contact base. Tell them we're coming in with a wounded Alliance asset. Request a medical team standing by." "Sir?" Hayes looked confused. "Are you sure about this? Command might not approve of bringing an alien into our facility." "Then they can court-martial me later," Chun said firmly. "Right now, this soldier needs help, and we're the only ones in position to provide it." As if to emphasize his point, the distant rumble of enemy aircraft began to echo across the battlefield. The hegemony forces were returning to secure the area, and anyone caught here would be killed or captured. Chun looked down at Kethra. "Can you walk? Because we need to move, and we're not leaving without you." Kethra struggled to her feet, her injured leg sending spikes of agony through her nervous system. But Chun was there immediately, offering his shoulder as support. "That's it," he encouraged. "One step at a time. We'll get through this together." As they began the slow journey back to human lines, Kethra found herself wondering if she had misjudged these strange beings. In all her years of service, no one had ever risked themselves for her welfare. No one had ever spoken to her like she mattered beyond her tactical value. But these humans were doing exactly that. Behind them, the scattered bodies of her packmates grew smaller in the distance. She mourned their loss, but for the first time since the attack, she felt something she hadn't expected to feel again: hope. The aircraft sounds grew closer, but Chun and his team didn't abandon her or pick up their pace beyond what she could manage. They adjusted their retreat to accommodate her limitations, covering her with their own bodies when enemy scouts passed overhead. "Almost there," Chun whispered as they approached the human perimeter. "Just a little further." Kethra had been betrayed by her own kind, left to die by those she had served loyally for years. But these strangers, these humans, had risked everything to save her. She was beginning to understand that not all species viewed loyalty as a one-way transaction. Some believed it was something worth sharing, worth reciprocating, worth defending even when it cost them something precious. As they crossed into human territory, she made a decision that would echo through the galaxy for years to come. If these beings could show such compassion to an abandoned enemy asset, perhaps they deserved the same loyalty she had once given so freely to those who had proven unworthy of it. The war was far from over, but something fundamental had changed on that battlefield. A bond had been forged between species that would prove stronger than any treaty or alliance agreement. And it had started with a simple choice: to help someone who needed it, regardless of the cost. The human medical facility hummed with activity as Dr. Sarah Okafor worked to save Kethra's life. The Vorthack combat hound lay unconscious on the examination table, her massive frame dwarfing the equipment designed for human patients. Around her, a team of human medics scrambled to adapt their procedures to an alien physiology they'd never encountered before. "Blood pressure is dropping," called out Medic Thompson, monitoring readings on a hastily modified scanner. "Whatever passes for blood in her system, she's losing it fast." Dr. Okafor didn't look up from the surgical site where she was working to repair internal bleeding. "Then, we'd better work faster. Chun, what can you tell me about Vorthack biology?" Staff Sergeant Chun stood in the corner, still covered in battlefield grime, but refusing to leave until he knew Kethra would survive. "Not much, document. I know, they're engineered for combat. Enhanced healing factor, pack hunters by nature. That's about it." "Enhanced healing," Dr. Okafor muttered, suturing damaged tissue with practiced precision. "That explains why some of these older wounds have healed so cleanly. Her body's trying to fix itself, but The damage is too extensive. Lieutenant Hayes appeared in the doorway, her expression grim. Doctor, we've got a problem. Command wants to speak with you. Now, tell them I'm busy saving a life. Dr. Okafor replied without stopping her work. Ma'am, with respect, I don't think it's going to fly this time. Colonel Morrison is pretty upset about having an alien in our medical facility. Chun stepped forward. The colonel can wait. We're not stopping now. Hayes looked uncomfortable. Sir, he specifically ordered me to escort you to his office immediately. He's questioning the decision to bring her here at all. Dr. Okafor's hands never stopped moving, but her voice carried an edge of anger. So he wants me to let her die on the table while we have a conversation about protocol? That's not what I'm saying, ma'am. But Thompson, take over here, Dr. Okafor ordered. Keep pressure on that artery. If her vitals start dropping, use the stimulant I prepared. It's based on adrenaline compounds, should work across species. She stripped off her gloves and turned to face Hayes. Fine, let's go see what the colonel has to say. But if she dies while we're talking, I'm holding him personally responsible. The walk to Morrison's office felt endless. Chin followed despite not being summoned, his jaw set with determination. They found the colonel reviewing reports at his desk, his weathered face creased with displeasure. Sergeant Chun, Morrison said without looking up, want to explain to me why you decided to compromise our mission parameters and bring an enemy combatant into our most sensitive facility? She's not an enemy combatant, sir, Chun replied steadily. She's a wounded Alliance asset who was abandoned by her own forces. An Alliance asset armed with claws and teeth that could tear a man apart, Morrison shot back. An asset whose loyalty is questionable at best, considering she was left behind by her own people. Dr. Okafor stepped forward. Colonel, with respect, this conversation can wait. I have a patient bleeding out in my medical bay, and every minute we waste here reduces her chances of survival. Morrison finally looked up, his expression cold. Doctor, I appreciate your dedication to the Hippocratic Oath, but we have bigger concerns than one alien animal. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Chin's hands clenched into fists, but before he could speak, Dr. Okafor's voice cut through the tension. That alien animal has more combat experience than half the soldiers on this base, she said quietly. She's been fighting this war for years, surviving battles that would break most humans. She's earned the right to be treated with respect. Has she? Morrison stood up, his voice rising. Because from where I sit, she's a security risk we can't afford. What happens when she wakes up? What happens when she decides we're the enemy? What happens when her pack instincts kick in and she tries to establish dominance? Shin couldn't stay quiet anymore. Sir, she could have attacked us on the battlefield. She was wounded, desperate, and we were strangers approaching her. But she chose to trust us. That tells me everything I need to know about her character. Morrison walked around his desk, studying both subordinates with calculating eyes. Sergeant, your emotional attachment to this creature is clouding your judgment. Dr. Okafor, your medical ethics are admirable, but misplaced. We're fighting a war here, not running a veterinary clinic. Then, what do you suggest, Colonel? Dr. Okafor asked, her voice dangerously quiet. That I let her die? That we drag her outside and put her out of her misery like some rabid dog? I suggest we consider the practical implications of our actions, Morrison replied. The Alliance abandoned her for a reason. Maybe they know something we don't. Maybe she's compromised, mentally unstable, or carrying some kind of biological weapon. Chun stepped forward. Or maybe they're cowards who abandoned a loyal soldier when she became inconvenient. The room fell silent. Morrison's eyes narrowed as he stared at Chun. That's a serious accusation, Sergeant. Are you saying the Alliance command structure is fundamentally flawed? I'm saying I know what I saw, Chun replied firmly. I saw a soldier who needed help, and I saw her own people walk away without looking back. That tells me more about them than it does about her. Dr. Okafor's communicator buzzed urgently. Doctor, you need to get back here now, came Thompson's voice. She's crashing. Without waiting for dismissal, Dr. Okafor sprinted from the room, Chin close behind her. Morrison's angry shouts followed them down the corridor, but neither looked back. They burst into the medical bay to find alarms blaring and Thompson frantically adjusting equipment. Kethera's vital signs were dropping rapidly, her breathing shallow and labored. What happened? Dr. Okafor demanded, already moving to the surgical site. Massive internal bleeding started about 5 minutes after you left, Thompson reported. The stimulant helped for a while, but her system's shutting down. Dr. Okafor examined the readings, her mind racing through possibilities. Her physiology is more complex than we thought. The healing factor isn't just accelerated cellular repair, it's a complete systemic response. When it fails, everything fails at once. Chun watched helplessly as the medical team worked. There has to be something you can do. I'm trying, Dr. Okafor said through gritted teeth. But I'm working blind here. I need to understand how her systems work together, and I need that information now. Hayes appeared in the doorway again, but this time her expression was different. Doctor, there's someone here who might be able to help. She stepped aside to reveal a small, gray-skinned alien in civilian clothes. The newcomer moved with the careful precision of someone accustomed to being the smallest person in any room, but his large eyes held sharp intelligence. I am Dr. Vinnick, the alien said in accented but clear English. I'm a xenobiologist with the Independent Colonies Medical Exchange Program. I understand you have a Vorthack patient in critical condition. Dr. Okafor looked up from her work. You know their physiology? I have extensive experience with their species, Dr. Vinnick replied, already moving toward the examination table. Their healing factor is tied to a complex neural network that regulates all bodily functions. When severely damaged, the system attempts to shut down all non-essential processes to preserve life, including breathing and circulation. Dr. Okafor asked. Unfortunately, yes. But there's a way to manually restart the system if one knows the correct neural pathways. Dr. Vinnick examined Kethera's condition with practiced efficiency. She is very close to complete system failure, but not beyond recovery. However, the procedure requires precise stimulation of nerve clusters located throughout her spine. One mistake could cause permanent paralysis or death. Chun stepped forward. Doc, you have to try. The risk is considerable, Dr. Vinnick warned. And, even if successful, she will require extensive recovery time. Weeks, possibly months. Then, we'll give her weeks or months, Dr. Okafor said firmly. Show me what you need. For the next hour, the two doctors worked in perfect synchronization. Dr. Vinnick guided Dr. Okafor through the delicate process of neural stimulation, using modified surgical instruments to access the nerve clusters that controlled Kethera's healing response. Chun and the medical team watched in tense silence as Kethera's vital signs fluctuated wildly. At one point, her breathing stopped completely, and Dr. Okafor had to manually stimulate her diaphragm while Dr. Vinnick worked to reset her autonomic functions. There, Dr. Vinnick said finally, stepping back from the table. The neural network is re-established. Her healing factor should begin to function normally within the next few hours. Almost immediately, Kethera's breathing became stronger and more regular. Her vital signs began to stabilize, and the monitors showed clear improvement in her condition. Dr. Okafor sagged with relief. Will she make a full recovery? With time and proper care, yes, Dr. Vinnick confirmed. Vorthack are remarkably resilient when their healing systems function properly. But she will need extensive rehabilitation to regain full mobility. Chun looked down at Kethera's unconscious form. She'll have whatever time she needs. Dr. Vinnick studied the human sergeant with curious eyes. You care deeply for her welfare. This is unusual among other species I have encountered. She's a soldier who was abandoned by her own people, Chun replied. In my book, that makes her one of ours now. Fascinating, Dr. Vinnick murmured. The humans' capacity for expanding their tribal loyalties continues to surprise me. Hayes, who had been quietly observing the entire procedure, finally spoke up. Dr. Vinnick, if you don't mind me asking, how did you know to come here? The small alien's expression became carefully neutral. I monitor Alliance medical channels for research purposes. When I detected the unique biosignature of a Vort hack in distress, I felt compelled to offer assistance. Chen sensed there was more to the story, but before he could ask, Colonel Morrison's voice echoed through the medical bay's comm system. All personnel to stations. We have incoming Alliance ships requesting permission to land. They're claiming they need to retrieve stolen property. Dr. Okafor looked up sharply. Stolen property? Hayes was already checking her communicator. Sir, they're specifically asking about a missing Vorthack combat hound. They say she was taken from the battlefield without authorization. Chen's expression hardened. So now she's valuable enough to retrieve. Dr. Vinnick moved closer to Kethra's bedside, his demeanor suddenly protective. The Alliance has no legal claim to her if she was abandoned on the battlefield. Under galactic law, she became a free agent the moment they left her to die. Try telling them that. Morrison's voice came over the comm again. Chun and Dr. Okafor in my office. Now, as they prepared to leave, Chun turned to Dr. Vinnick. Will you stay with her? The xenobiologist nodded solemnly. She will not be alone. Walking back to Morrison's office, Chun and Dr. Okafor exchanged worried glances. The Alliance had abandoned Kethra when she was wounded and useless to them, but now the humans had saved her life. They suddenly wanted her back. It was going to be a fight, but Chun had already made his decision. They hadn't risked everything to save her just to hand her over to the people who had left her die. The real test was just beginning, and this time, the enemy wasn't on some distant battlefield. They were coming directly to their door, demanding the return of a soldier they had never deserved in the first place. The Alliance delegation arrived with the pomp and arrogance that had made them infamous throughout the galaxy. 3 sleek ships landed in perfect formation on the human base's makeshift landing pad, their hulls gleaming with the kind of finish that spoke of resources and power. From the lead vessel emerged Commander Zethus, the same reptilian officer who had ordered Kethra's abandonment just days before. Colonel Morrison stood at attention as the delegation approached, his expression carefully neutral. Behind him, Chun and Dr. Okafor watched with barely concealed hostility as the aliens who had left their patient to die now demanded her return. Colonel Morrison, Zethus began without preamble, his forked tongue flicking out to taste the air. I am Commander Zethus of the Galactic Alliance 3rd Fleet. We understand you are harboring stolen Alliance property. Morrison's eyebrows rose slightly. Stolen property, Commander? I'm afraid you'll have to be more specific. A Vorthack combat hound designated K. 7742, Zethus replied, consulting a datapad. The animal was removed from a battlefield without proper authorization. We demand its immediate return. The animal? Chen stepped forward despite Morrison's warning glance. Is that what you call a soldier who served under your command? Zethus turned his cold, reptilian gaze on Chun. Sergeant, is it? You misunderstand the nature of Vorthack combat units. They are bred and trained as weapons, nothing more. Biological assets to be deployed as tactical situations require. If she's just a weapon, Dr. Okafor interjected, then why did you leave her behind on the battlefield? Surely the Alliance doesn't make a habit of abandoning valuable equipment. The commander's expression didn't change, but his lieutenant, a younger reptilian with nervous eyes, shifted uncomfortably. The tactical situation required immediate withdrawal, Zethus said smoothly. Damaged assets that would slow the retreat had to be left behind. Damaged assets, Chen repeated, his voice dangerously quiet. You mean wounded soldiers? I mean malfunctioning biological weapons, Zethus snapped, his composure cracking slightly. The sonic attack rendered the entire Vorthack unit non-functional. They became liabilities rather than assets. Morrison stepped forward before Chun could respond. Commander, even if we accept your characterization of the situation, the fact remains that you abandoned this asset on an active battlefield. Under galactic salvage laws, there are no salvage laws concerning sentient military assets, Zethus interrupted. The hound belongs to the Alliance. It was bred in our facilities, trained by our personnel, and assigned to our forces. Your unauthorized recovery of Alliance property constitutes theft under interstellar law. Dr. Venick emerged from the medical facility at that moment, his small form barely reaching the waists of the larger beings around him. Actually, Commander, you're incorrect about both the law and the facts. Zethus turned toward the xenobiologist with obvious disdain. And you are? Dr. Venick, Independent Colonies Medical Exchange. I specialize in xenobiology and interspecies rights law. The small alien pulled out his own datapad. According to Galactic Code 7742.3, any military asset, biological or otherwise, that is deliberately abandoned on a battlefield becomes salvage available to whoever recovers it. The Hound was not abandoned, Zethus protested. It was left behind due to tactical necessity. The distinction is meaningless, Dr. Venick replied calmly. You made a conscious decision to leave wounded personnel behind to save time. That constitutes abandonment under any legal definition. Chun watched the exchange with growing satisfaction, but he could see that Zethus wasn't going to back down easily. The commander was clearly someone accustomed to getting his way through intimidation and superior firepower. Doctor, Zethus said, his voice taking on a threatening tone, the independent colonies would be wise not to interfere in Alliance military matters. Your neutrality in this conflict depends on maintaining proper relationships with all parties. Is that a threat, Commander? Morrison asked, his own voice hardening. It is a statement of fact, Zethus replied. The Alliance has certain expectations regarding cooperation from neutral parties. Harboring stolen Alliance property would be seen as a hostile act. The tension in the air was palpable. Chun could see Morrison weighing his options, calculating the political ramifications of defying the Alliance against the moral implications of handing Kethra over to the people who had abandoned her. Perhaps, Dr. Venick said quietly, we should ask the individual in question what she prefers. Zethus laughed, a harsh sound like breaking glass. Ask a biological weapon for its preferences? Doctor, you clearly don't understand the nature of Vorthack conditioning. These creatures are programmed for absolute obedience. They have no individual will or desires beyond following orders. Then, you won't mind if we test that theory, Chin said suddenly. If she's just a programmed weapon with no free will, she'll automatically follow your commands when she wakes up. But if she chooses to stay with the people who saved her life, the creature's response to conditioning failure is irrelevant, Zethus snapped. Alliance property remains Alliance property regardless of temporary behavioral modifications. Temporary behavioral modifications? Dr. Okafor stepped forward, her anger finally boiling over. You mean learning to trust the people who didn't abandon her to die? You mean developing loyalty to beings who treated her like a person instead of a tool? It means nothing, Zethus insisted. Vorthack imprinting can be corrected with proper reconditioning protocols. A few weeks in our behavior modification facilities, and the creature will be fully functional again. The casual way he spoke about erasing Kethra's newfound sense of trust and autonomy made Chin's blood run cold. These beings didn't just see her as property. They saw her consciousness itself as something to be manipulated and controlled. Over my dead body, Chin said quietly. Zethus turned toward him with predatory interest. That could be arranged, Sergeant. The Alliance has significant military assets in this system. A single human outpost would present no meaningful resistance to a proper assault. Morrison stepped between them. Commander, are you threatening to attack a neutral medical facility? I am stating facts about Alliance military capabilities, Zethus replied smoothly. What you choose to infer from those facts is your decision. The standoff was interrupted by a commotion from the medical facility. Thompson burst out of the building, his expression urgent. Sir, she's awake, and she's asking for Sergeant Chun. Zethus moved immediately toward the medical building. Excellent. We can resolve this matter quickly. Hold on, Morrison commanded. No one enters that facility without my authorization. Colonel, Zethus said dangerously, you are testing the limits of Alliance patience. And you're testing the limits of human hospitality, Morrison replied. This is still a human base under human command in neutral territory. You'll follow our protocols, or you can leave. For a moment, it looked like Zethus might order his escort to force their way into the medical facility. Chun counted 6 Alliance guards, all armed with advanced energy weapons. The human security detail was outnumbered and outgunned. But Dr. Vinnick spoke up again, his quiet voice carrying surprising authority. "Commander, I should point out that any use of force against neutral medical personnel would constitute a war crime under galactic law. The independent colonies take such violations very seriously." Zethus hesitated. The independent colonies might be neutral, but they had significant influence in galactic politics. A war crimes accusation from them could seriously complicate alliance operations throughout the sector. Morrison seized the opportunity. "Here's what we're going to do. A small delegation from both sides will enter the medical facility together. We'll see what the patient has to say. If she chooses to return with you, she's free to go. If she chooses to stay, then we respect that decision." "The creature's preferences are irrelevant," Zethus repeated, but his voice lacked conviction. "Then prove it," Chun challenged. "If she's really just a biological robot with no free will, demonstrate it. Give her a direct order and watch her follow it without question." Zethus considered this for a long moment. He was clearly confident in Vorthack conditioning protocols, and the opportunity to publicly demonstrate Alliance control over their biological assets was appealing. "Very well, but when the creature obeys my commands, you will surrender it immediately. And if she doesn't," Morrison asked. "She will," Zethus said with absolute certainty. Vorthack conditioning is absolute. Questioning orders is literally impossible for their species. The delegation entered the medical facility to find Kethra awake and alert on her recovery bed. Her golden eyes tracked their movement, and Chun could see intelligence and awareness in her gaze. This wasn't the blank stare of a programmed weapon. This was a thinking being evaluating a complex situation. Dr. Okafor had positioned herself protectively near the bed, and Kethra's gaze lingered on her with what looked like gratitude. When her eyes found Chun, something that could only be described as relief flickered across her features. "K. 7742, Zethus commanded in a voice accustomed to instant obedience. "You will rise and follow me to the transport immediately." Kethra looked at the commander for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then, slowly and deliberately, she turned her head away from him and looked directly at Chun. The silence in the room was deafening. Zethus's composure cracked completely. "K. 7742, you will obey. That is a direct command." Kethra's response was to shift closer to Chun, clearly choosing her protector over her former commander. "Impossible, j'étais breted." The conditioning protocols are absolute. No Vorthack has ever disobeyed a direct order. Dr. Vinnick stepped forward, his expression thoughtful. "Commander, perhaps the issue isn't with Vorthack conditioning. Perhaps the issue is with your understanding of what loyalty actually means." "What do you mean?" Morrison asked. "Vorthack are pack creatures," Dr. Vinnick explained. "Their loyalty isn't programmed. It's instinctual. They bond with those who prove themselves worthy of trust and protection. Your conditioning protocols work by exploiting that natural tendency, but they can't override it entirely." He gestured toward Kethra, who was now allowing Chun to examine her healing wounds. "She has formed a new pack bond with those who saved her life and treated her with respect. That bond is stronger than any artificial conditioning because it's based on genuine trust rather than manufactured obedience." Zethus stared at his former asset in shock and growing anger. "This is unacceptable. The creature must be reconditioned immediately." "The individual," Chun corrected firmly, "has made her choice, and we're going to respect that choice. You cannot keep Alliance property." Zethus snarled. Kethra lifted her head then, and for the first time since the delegation had arrived, she spoke. Her voice was rough from her injuries, but her words were clear and strong. "I am not property," she said in carefully pronounced English. "I am Kethra warrior of no pack, bound by choice to those who showed honor when others showed none. The room fell silent as the full implications of her words sank in. This wasn't just defiance of orders. This was a complete rejection of everything the Alliance believed about Vorthack nature and conditioning. Zethus took a step toward her, his hand moving to his weapon. "You will come with me now, or face the consequences." Chun moved between them instantly, his own weapon drawn. "The only consequences here are going to be yours if you threaten her again." The confrontation that had been building since the Alliance arrived was about to explode into violence, but Kethra's voice cut through the tension once more. "I have served the Alliance faithfully for 8 years," she said, her golden eyes fixed on Zethus. "I have bled for your cause, killed for your objectives, and asked for nothing in return but the loyalty I gave so freely. When I needed that loyalty returned, you walked away." She struggled to her feet, Dr. Okafor ready to steady her if needed. "These humans owed me nothing, yet they risked everything to save my life. They treated my wounds, shared their resources, and defended my right to choose my own path. That is the behavior of a true pack, not the cold calculation of those who see lives as acceptable losses." Zethus was speechless, his worldview crumbling in the face of a biological weapon that wasn't supposed to have opinions, let alone the ability to articulate them so eloquently. "I renounce my allegiance to the Alliance," Kethra continued, her voice growing stronger with each word. "I claim the right of free choice recognized by galactic law for all sentient beings. And I choose to stay with those who have proven themselves worthy of the loyalty you never deserved." The medical bay erupted in chaos as Zethus finally lost all control and reached for his weapon. But he never cleared leather. Chin was already moving, Dr. Okafor was shouting for security, and Kethra, despite her injuries, was baring fangs that could rip a man apart. The Alliance had come to reclaim their property, but they were about to discover that Kethra was no one's property anymore. She was a free being making free choices, and she had chosen her side. The war was about to take a very personal turn. The standoff in the medical bay lasted only seconds, but those seconds stretched like hours. Zethus had his weapon halfway out of its holster when human security forces burst through the doors, their rifles trained on the Alliance delegation. Behind them came Dr. Vennick, his small frame somehow radiating authority as he stepped between the opposing forces. "Commander Zethus," Dr. Vennick said calmly, "I strongly advise against drawing a weapon in a neutral medical facility. Such an action would be considered an act of war against the independent colonies." Zethus froze, his reptilian eyes calculating the odds. 6 Alliance guards against a dozen human soldiers in their own facility, with a xenobiologist whose legal authority could bring down half the galaxy's wrath on the Alliance if they harmed him. "You're making a serious mistake," Zethus hissed, but his hand moved away from his weapon. "The Alliance will not forget this insult." "The only insult here," Chun said firmly, "is you threatening a wounded soldier under medical protection." Kethra remained standing despite her obvious pain, her golden eyes fixed on Zethus with something that went beyond defiance. It was disappointment, Chun realized. The look of someone who had believed in something only to discover it was never worthy of that belief. Colonel Morrison stepped forward, his command presence filling the room. "Commander, you've had your answer. The individual has made her choice freely and in front of witnesses. Under galactic law, that settles the matter. Galactic law does not apply to Alliance military assets," Zethus protested, but his voice lacked conviction. Dr. Vennick consulted his datapad. "Actually, Commander, I've been reviewing the relevant statutes while you were negotiating. The Sentient Rights Act of 2387 specifically addresses this situation. Any being capable of autonomous decision-making and self-determination cannot be held as property, regardless of their origin or initial legal status. The Vorthack were created as weapons," Zethus argued. "They have no natural rights because they have no natural existence." That argument was settled in the Andraxian Tribunal of 2401, Dr. Vinnick replied smoothly. The court ruled that the manner of a being's creation does not determine their fundamental rights. Whether born naturally or engineered in a laboratory, consciousness confers personhood. Chun watched Zethus's expression change as the legal reality became clear. The Alliance commander had expected a simple retrieval operation, not a legal challenge that could expose their entire biological weapons program to galactic scrutiny. Furthermore, Dr. Vinnick continued, I should point out that the existence of Vorthack biological weapons may itself violate the Geneva Conventions as they apply to interstellar warfare. The creation of sentient beings specifically for combat purposes is problematic under current law. The threat was subtle but unmistakable. If the Alliance pushed this issue, they risked having their entire Vorthack program declared illegal by galactic courts. The political and military ramifications would be enormous. Zethus looked around the room, seeing enemies and neutral parties but no allies. His lieutenant was watching Kethra with something like wonder, clearly shaken by seeing a Vorthack speak freely for the first time. His guards were outnumbered and in hostile territory. His legal position was crumbling by the minute. But the Alliance commander wasn't ready to concede defeat. This matter is far from over, he said finally. The Alliance has significant resources in this sector. Your little outpost exists only because we permit it. Is that another threat, Commander? Morrison asked. It is a reminder of reality, Zethus replied. The Alliance has 3 battle groups within a day's travel of this position. The independent colonies have, what? A few medical ships and research vessels. Dr. Vinnick smiled, an expression that somehow managed to be both polite and predatory. The independent colonies have something much more valuable than warships, Commander. We have the communication networks that connect every neutral system in this sector. One message from me, and every independent world will know that the Alliance creates sentient beings as weapons and then abandons them when they become inconvenient. The implications hit Zethus like a physical blow. The independent colonies served as neutral ground for countless diplomatic and trade negotiations. If they spread word of Alliance biological weapons programs, it would shatter relationships the Alliance had spent decades building. You wouldn't dare, Zethus breathed. Try me, Dr. Vinnick replied calmly. Chun stepped forward, sensing the moment was right to press their advantage. Commander, you have a choice here. You can leave peacefully and maintain the fiction that this was a simple misunderstanding. Or you can escalate this into an interstellar incident that ends with your biological weapons program exposed to galactic scrutiny. What's it going to be? Morrison added. For a long moment, Zethus stared at Kethra as if he could will her back into obedience through sheer force of personality. But the Vorthack warrior met his gaze steadily, no longer the compliant weapon he remembered, but something new and dangerous. A free being who had chosen her own path. This is not over, Zethus said finally. The Alliance has a long memory, and we do not forgive those who steal from us. No one stole anything, Chun replied. You threw her away, and we picked up the pieces. That's the difference between us. Zethus turned on his heel and stalked toward the door, his delegation following. But at the threshold, he paused and looked back at his former lieutenant. Lieutenant Vex, he commanded, you will accompany the delegation to the transport. The younger reptilian officer hesitated, his eyes moving between Zethus and Kethra. Chin saw recognition in that gaze and realized this was the handler who had hesitated before abandoning her on the battlefield. Sir, Vex said slowly, I request permission to remain here temporarily. For debriefing purposes. Zethus's eyes narrowed. Lieutenant, that was an order, not a request. Yes, sir, Vex replied. But I believe there are significant intelligence implications to this situation that require further investigation. It was a thin excuse, and everyone in the room knew it. But it gave Vex cover to stay without openly defying orders. And it gave Zethus a face-saving way to leave without his entire delegation. Very well, Zethus said after a moment. You have 48 hours to complete your investigation. After that, you will return to the fleet with a full report. As the main Alliance delegation departed, the tension in the medical bay began to ease. But Sean could see that Kethra was struggling to remain standing, her injuries and the emotional strain taking their toll. Easy, Dr. Okafor said, moving to support her. You've done enough heroics for one day. Kethra allowed herself to be guided back to the medical bed, but her eyes remained fixed on Lieutenant Vex. Why did you stay? She asked. Vex approached slowly, his movements careful and respectful. Because I need to apologize, he said quietly. On a battlefield, when the commander ordered the retreat, I should have refused. I should have carried you to safety myself. But you followed orders, Kethra observed without accusation. I followed orders, Vex agreed, his voice heavy with regret. And in doing so, I betrayed everything I claimed to believe about loyalty and duty. I have dishonored myself and my service. Shin watched the exchange with interest. This Alliance officer was clearly struggling with the same questions that had driven him to rescue Kethra in the first place. What did loyalty really mean, and to whom did a soldier owe their ultimate allegiance? The Alliance teaches that obedience is the highest virtue, Kethra said thoughtfully. But these humans showed me that there are virtues higher than obedience. Honor, compassion, the willingness to risk everything for someone who cannot repay the debt. Vex nodded slowly. I have observed this as well. In the time since the retreat, I have wondered what kind of beings would risk themselves for an abandoned enemy asset. The answer appears to be beings with a different understanding of what it means to be civilized. Dr. Vinnick stepped forward, his expression curious. Lieutenant, may I ask what you plan to report to your superiors? Vex considered the question carefully. I plan to report the truth. That the Vorthack designated K-7742 is no longer Alliance property because she has been granted asylum by neutral parties under galactic law. That any attempt to retrieve her by force would constitute a violation of independent colony sovereignty, and that the humans responsible for the situation acted with honor and integrity throughout. That's not going to make you popular with command, Morrison observed. No, Vex agreed. It is likely to end my career. But some things are more important than career advancement. Chun felt a surge of respect for the young officer. It took courage to stand up to superior officers, especially when those officers had the power to destroy your future with a single bad report. Lieutenant, Chun said, if the Alliance decides you're no longer welcome, you should know that the independent colonies always have room for beings of principle. Dr. Vinnick nodded enthusiastically. Indeed, officers with your moral clarity are exactly what we need in our diplomatic corps. Vex looked surprised by the offers. You trust me? Despite my association with those who abandoned Kethra? Your association with them is exactly why we trust you, Chen replied. You've seen firsthand what happens when loyalty becomes one-sided. You understand the difference between blind obedience and principled service. Kethra spoke up from her medical bed. The humans have a saying, judge a being not by their worst moment, but by how they respond when they recognize their mistakes. You chose to stay and apologize rather than flee with the others. That speaks to your character. Dr. Okafor finished checking Kethra's vital signs and turned to address the group. Well, character aside, my patient needs rest. And we all need to prepare for the possibility that Commander Zethus might not honor his retreat as permanent. Morrison nodded grimly. Doc's right. This isn't over. The Alliance doesn't like to lose face, and we've handed them a pretty public defeat. We need to be ready for retaliation. What kind of retaliation? Chen asked. Could be anything from economic pressure to direct military action, Morrison replied. But my guess is they'll try something subtle first. Maybe cut off our supply lines, or pressure other species to stop trading with us. Dr. Vinnick looked thoughtful. Actually, they may find that more difficult than they expect. Word of what happened here will spread quickly through independent colonies networks. The Alliance's reputation will take a significant hit when neutral worlds learn they create sentient beings as weapons and abandon them when convenient. Good, Chen said firmly. Maybe if enough people know the truth, other Vorthack units will start questioning their situation. Kethra's ears perked up at this. You think others of my kind could be freed? I think, Chin replied carefully, that once the truth is out there, change becomes inevitable. It might take time, but beings who know they have choices tend to make them. Lieutenant Vex nodded slowly. There are rumors within the Alliance military about Vorthack conditioning failures. Individual cases where pack bonds with handlers became stronger than programmed loyalties. Command has been suppressing these reports, but the pattern is there. How many units are we talking about? Morrison asked. Thousands, Vex replied quietly. The Alliance has been breeding Vorthack for combat operations for over 20 years. They are deployed throughout the fleet in various capacities. The scope of it was staggering. Thousands of sentient beings, bred for war, conditioned for absolute obedience, never knowing they had the right to choose their own path. We're going to need a bigger medical bay, Dr. Okafor said wryly. Chin looked down at Kethra, who was listening to the conversation with growing excitement despite her exhaustion. This warrior, who had been abandoned by her own people, might be the catalyst for the largest liberation movement in galactic history. But first, she needed to heal, and they all needed to survive whatever retaliation the Alliance would send their way. The war had just become personal, and Chin suspected that was exactly how Kethra wanted it. 6 months later, the small human outpost had transformed into something unprecedented in galactic history, a sanctuary for beings seeking freedom from their creators. What had started as a medical facility was now a bustling community where former Alliance biological weapons learned what it meant to be free. Kethra stood at the observation deck overlooking the expanded compound, her injuries fully healed, but her perspective forever changed. Below her, dozens of her former pack mates moved freely through the settlement. Some tended gardens where they grew food for the community. Others worked alongside human engineers on construction projects. A few had even begun teaching human children about Vorthack culture and history. Credits for your thoughts, Chin said, joining her at the railing. Kethra smiled, an expression that would have been impossible during her Alliance days. I was thinking about pack loyalty, she replied. The Alliance taught us that loyalty flowed upward, from the weak to the strong. But you humans showed us it could flow in all directions, creating bonds that strengthen everyone. Chin nodded toward a group of young Vorthack playing with human children in the compound's central area. Seems like the next generation is figuring that out on their own. The sound of approaching footsteps made them turn. Lieutenant Vex approached, but he no longer wore Alliance insignia. Instead, he sported the simple blue uniform of the independent colony's diplomatic corps. How did the debrief go? Chin asked. Vex's expression was grim but determined. As expected, Command has declared me a traitor and issued a warrant for my arrest. But the information I provided about Alliance biological weapons programs has been distributed to every neutral world in the sector. Any response yet? Kethra inquired. More than we dared hope, Vex replied, his tone brightening slightly. 17 independent systems have filed formal protests with the Galactic Council. 3 major trade alliances have suspended commerce with Alliance worlds pending investigation. And, most importantly, we've received communication from over 40 Vorthack units requesting asylum. Chin let out a low whistle. 40 units? How many individuals does that represent? Approximately 2,000 Vorthack warriors, Vex said, along with support staff, handlers who refuse to abandon their charges, and even some Alliance civilians who are horrified by what their government has been doing. The magnitude of it was staggering. What had begun as one human's refusal to abandon a wounded soldier was becoming the largest defection in Alliance history. Can we handle that many refugees? Chin asked. Dr. Okafor emerged from the medical complex at that moment, overhearing the question. We'll have to, she said firmly. Dr. Vennick and I have been working with independent colonies leadership to establish additional sanctuary sites throughout the sector. The colonies are fully committed to this effort. What about the Alliance response? Kethra asked. Surely they won't allow this defection to continue unchallenged. Vex's expression darkened. They've tried everything short of direct military action. Economic sanctions, diplomatic pressure, even attempted sabotage of communication networks. But each move they make only confirms what we've been saying about their character. And direct military action? Chun pressed. Problematic, Vex admitted. An attack on independent colonies' territory would bring the entire neutral bloc into the war against the Alliance. They're not prepared for a conflict on that scale, especially with internal dissent growing among their own forces. Dr. Okafor checked her tablet. Speaking of dissent, we've got another group arriving today. Mixed unit from the 7th Fleet, including both Vorthak and their human handlers. Human handlers? Chun looked surprised. Apparently word of what happened here has spread beyond just the Vorthak, Vex explained. Alliance humans who work closely with biological weapons units are beginning to question the ethics of the program. Some are choosing to defect rather than participate in what they now see as systematic enslavement. The irony wasn't lost on Chun. The Alliance had created the Vorthak to be perfect soldiers, completely loyal and utterly obedient. But in doing so, they had also created beings capable of inspiring loyalty in others, beings whose nobility of spirit could convert even their handlers to their cause. There's something else, Dr. Okafor said, her expression serious. We've received a diplomatic communication from the hegemony. The group fell silent. The hegemony was the Alliance's primary enemy in this sector, an authoritarian regime known for its brutal efficiency and complete disregard for civilian casualties. What do they want? Chun asked warily. To offer us protection, Dr. Okafor replied. Apparently, they're willing to guarantee the safety of our sanctuary sites in exchange for intelligence about Alliance biological weapons programs. Kethera's ears flattened against her head, a sign of distress. We cannot ally ourselves with the hegemony. They are even worse than the Alliance in their treatment of sentient beings. Agreed, Chun said immediately. Whatever problems we have with the Alliance, the hegemony isn't the solution. Vex nodded emphatically. The hegemony would use the Vorthak just as ruthlessly as the Alliance does, only with fewer pretenses about their motives. So what do we do? Dr. Okafor asked. We can't stay neutral forever if both sides are pressuring us to choose. The answer came from an unexpected source. Dr. Vinnick appeared at the edge of their group, his small form carrying a datapad that glowed with urgent messages. Actually, the xenobiologist said with barely contained excitement, neutrality may no longer be an option. But not for the reasons you think. What do you mean? Chun asked. I've been in communication with similar refugee movements throughout the galaxy, Dr. Vinnick explained. What's happening here isn't isolated. The revelation about Alliance biological weapons has triggered examination of similar programs throughout known space. He activated his datapad's holographic display, showing a star map dotted with pulsing lights. These are confirmed sanctuary sites for various species seeking freedom from military bondage. This is a revolution, and it's spreading faster than any government can contain it. Kethera stared at the display in wonder. All of those lights represent freed beings? Freed or seeking freedom, Dr. Vinnick confirmed. The Andromedans have discovered their government has been using engineered telepaths as espionage assets. The Centauri Republic's bio-enhanced shock troops are demanding recognition as full citizens. Even the hegemony is facing rebellions among their cybernetically enhanced soldiers. The implications were staggering. The careful balance of power that had defined galactic politics for centuries was crumbling as artificial beings across the galaxy demanded recognition of their fundamental rights. The Independent Colonies Council has called an emergency session, Dr. Vinnick continued. They're proposing a new galactic charter that would recognize the rights of all sentient beings regardless of their origin or method of creation. Will it pass? Vex asked. With every day that passes, more neutral worlds sign on to the proposal, Dr. Vinnick replied. The major powers are finding themselves increasingly isolated. They can either adapt to the new reality or face continuing rebellion among their own forces. Chun looked out over the compound, where beings who had never been allowed to choose their own path were now building a community based on mutual respect and shared purpose. So, what happens to us? To all of this? Kethera placed a hand on his shoulder, her claws carefully retracted in a gesture of affection. We continue what we started. We prove that freedom and dignity aren't privileges to be granted by governments, but rights to be claimed by anyone with the courage to demand them. The Alliance will try to stop us, Dr. Okafor pointed out. Let them try, Kethera replied with quiet confidence. They created us to be warriors, but they never understood what we were truly fighting for. Now we know. Chun smiled as he watched a group of former Alliance handlers teaching Vorthak pups to read, while nearby, human children learned traditional Vorthak songs from their elders. This wasn't the sterile hierarchy of military command structures. This was something organic and beautiful, a community where worth was measured not by rank or function, but by character and contribution. You know, Chin said thoughtfully, when I decided to help one wounded soldier, I never imagined it would lead to this. That's the thing about doing the right thing, Kethera replied. You never know how far the ripples will spread. As if summoned by their conversation, a young Vorthak approached the group. She was barely out of puppyhood, born in the sanctuary to parents who had escaped Alliance conditioning facilities. Miss Kethera, the youngster said in carefully pronounced English. My teacher says you were there at the beginning, when the humans first showed kindness to our people. Kethera knelt to the pup's level. I was there, little one, but I wasn't the beginning. The beginning was when beings decided that compassion was stronger than fear, and that loyalty earned is more valuable than obedience demanded. Will you tell me the story? The pup asked eagerly. Kethera looked around at her friends, for that's what they had become, this unlikely family of humans, aliens, and former Alliance personnel, and saw the same answer in all their eyes. I'll tell you the story, she agreed. But remember, it's not finished yet. Every day, we continue to write new chapters. As they gathered in the community center that evening, beings from a dozen different species and backgrounds came together to hear Kethera's tale. She spoke of abandonment and rescue, of loyalty betrayed and friendship earned, of the moment when she chose to trust strangers who had shown her more kindness in a single day than her own people had shown in years of service. But more than that, she spoke of possibility, of a galaxy where beings were valued for who they were rather than what they had been designed to do, of a future where the circumstances of one's creation didn't determine the limits of one's potential. When she finished, the diverse audience sat in contemplative silence. Then, slowly, one by one, they began to share their own stories. Tales of escape and refuge, of handlers who chose compassion over orders, of the moment they realized they had the power to choose their own destiny. Far above them, the stars wheeled in their ancient patterns, indifferent to the political upheavals of the beings who lived beneath them. But on one small world, in one growing community, something unprecedented was taking root. The idea that freedom wasn't something to be given or taken away, but something that existed wherever beings had the courage to claim it. The Alliance had created the Vorthak to be perfect weapons. Instead, they had created perfect teachers, beings whose example would inspire generations to come. And it had all started with one human's simple decision. No one gets left behind. As Chun looked around at the community they had built together, he realized that sometimes the most important battles weren't fought with weapons or politics or grand strategies. Sometimes they were won by simply refusing to abandon those who needed help, even when, especially when, everyone else said it was easier to walk away. The war would continue among the stars, but here, in this sanctuary built on the foundation of mutual respect and shared struggle, they had already won the only victory that truly mattered. The triumph of compassion over convenience, of loyalty over expedience, of hope over despair. And that victory, once achieved, could never be taken away.